People don't see it. It's a lot.
I know there's lots going on. We're not ready to start. We got to wait for some. I don't see the mayor on here yet, and I think Steve Rumlin actually went down to City Hall, so he may be coming to my office. So
yeah, Councilman, he did. I just tried to text him to let him know.
yeah. So, but let's everybody just sort of sit tight for a few seconds because this is going to be the Steve Rumlin show pretty much anyhow.
Yeah,
you need him. We could talk instead about Carolina baseball and see if we can get some people, some healthy bodies on the lineup.
Man, I tell you, that was terrible. A terrible last 2 weekends. Oh.
Yeah. Well, part of that is just that they're so beat up, Kevin. I mean, it's and another person went down. God bless them.
Yeah. We're lucky we don't have Searson on here right now. He'd be all over the Gamecocks.
We can't be all over is my #1 Wake Forest Demon Deacons, who are the #1 college baseball team in the country right now.
Are they ranked #1 now? Wow.
They are #1 now.
Congrats.
They beat number 19 Boston College over the weekend.
Morning, guys.
That was nice.
I'm sorry for that.
I had it in my head it was in person.
Y'all pull up some chairs, whatever you want to do. How y'all doing? Y'all do your mail.
Hi, Graham.
How are you? Y'all want chairs and okay. I'll move out of the way. So is the mayor joining us? Anybody know? I don't see Rick Giroux on here. Rick's on vacation. Have you ever heard from the mayor's office? I don't see him.
I have not.
We got a quorum otherwise, don't we?
Yes.
Yeah. Y'all can see Steve's also in the office. There you go. There he is.
Well, we can get started and you jump on afterwards.
All right, I just got a text. Mayor's about to log in. So give me 2 seconds. I really don't think we could take that long to because most of these things are pretty straightforward. Let's give the mayor a chance to log in.
Councilmember, I've reached out to Jennifer. She's calling Liz just to confirm about the mayor's office.
Okay.
Liz just texted me to let everybody know the mayor's going to be joining.
Okay, thank you, sir.
There he is. He's connecting now. Hey, Councilmember Brady, I'm calling you for the invocation if you don't mind.
That sounds great.
Mayor, can you hear us all right? You're muted still, I think.
Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. This is the May 8th, 2023 meeting of the Public Safety Committee. I've got 3 visitors in my office. So we're doing this sort of partially live and partially by Zoom. I'm going to call on Councilmember Brady, if you wouldn't mind lead us in an invocation, sir.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. If we can all bow our heads. Lord, we thank you for this beautiful day in this beautiful city. And I pray that you will touch our hearts and touch our minds so that we can carry out government's most sacred duty, which is the safety of our citizens. We ask this in your son's precious and holy name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
Amen.
The next item of business is approval of our April 10, 2023 minutes. I'll entertain a motion to approve.
Move for approval.
Second.
Any nays? All in favor say aye.
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 There's no old business. We've got under new business items A, B, C, D, E, and F. And the first one, Steve, y'all see Steve okay?
Yes.
All right, I brought my microphone over again. All right, so the first one is an ordinance to amend chapter 7 of the code to adopt the latest edition of permissive codes published by the International Code Council, Inc. I have a copy of that, and Steve, you want to lead us off on that?
That one actually isn't mine.
Oh, okay.
I'm not sure who's.
Melissa, is that yours?
That's mine, Councilmember Shade. This came on behalf of Ken Granata. This is pursuant to South Carolina Code 6960, which allows localities to adopt the permissive codes published by the ICC. We're proposing to adopt the international existing building code, as well as the swimming pool and spa code.
Okay. So what major changes are, this is just adopting the code to be in conformity with, I guess, the rest of civilization?
Well, yes, I think that's a fair way of putting it. Again, we're not required to adopt these since they're permissive, but if we are going to, it does require us to adopt the most recent version that the state has accepted, and that's the 2021 ICC code for both of those.
This time I entertain a motion to adopt
So moved.
item 4A.
Second.
Any further discussion by members of the committee? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. All right. The second one is an ordinance regarding masked or disguised persons. See, this is yours.
Yes, this is an update to our mask ordinance. I'm just going to go briefly through the changes, and then if anyone has any questions, we can go more in depth. What we're adding to the ordinance is a mens rea element. That is, we're putting in a requirement that basically there's an intent to conceal your identity would be a part of the offense, which currently is not in the ordinance. We've changed the wording place open to the public rather than public place, and that would include stores and businesses rather than just parks and streets and that sort of thing. We added bandanas, baklavas, and other devices which hide or cover a substantial portion of the face so as to conceal identity. That's added to currently. We just have mask and disguise are the things that are listed in the ordinance. We've added an exception for masks used for sporting activities. We've clarified the gas mask language to basically state that it only applies to masks that are prescribed or permitted by city, county, state, or federal authorities during a declared state of emergency or civil defense drill. And then finally, we've added a medical mask exception for bona fide medical reasons. However, the mask can only cover the nose and mouth and no other parts of a person's face.
All right, so at this point, with that backdrop, I'll entertain a motion to approve item 4B.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any questions for Steve or any discussion that we wish to have concerning item B? Mr. Mayor.
So, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I would like to please, just to cite for justification, have there been an increase in folks wearing masks to conceal their identity, an increase in any incidents that have occurred where that was the case, and would just like to have a little background on that.
Any increase in a problem? Well, I think one of the issues, Mr. Mayor, that there is a state statute that deals with this specific activity, and I think this is going to be conformity with that state statute as well, or consistent with that.
It is. The statute we have, or the ordinance we have, it's not been updated in quite some time. So, part of the reason is after COVID, there's a lot more people wearing masks for different reasons, is to kind of clarify what, reasons people are wearing masks. But I personally have had a few officers report to me being in convenience stores or gas stations and having people come in with masks that are not medical masks. And then basically telling the officer they have no right to tell them what mask they can wear, and they're wearing it for COVID. So that's created some confrontation and situations for our officers. Some of the officers that are on the call may be able to speak in more detail about that, but that's some of the feedback I've gotten from our officers.
Thank you. I'd heard that as well, and I just thought I would ask you all to confirm this. And Mr. Chairman, I trust we're not going to confuse a baklava with baklava, because it is a Greek based.
One you wear, one you eat. And it is, but we are coming up on Greek week anyhow, so we want to make sure that our Greek friends are not confused either.
But would someone clarify or define what a balaclava is? Is that the right pronunciation?
Yeah, my understanding is one of those things you wear around your neck that you can then pull up on your face.
I see. Understood. Now, in cold weather, people do wear such things, to stay warm. I don't think it's the intent if someone had a balaclava or a full ski mask, if it were very cold weather and they were wearing such a garment to stay warm. That's clearly not our intent. So how do you deal with that when the weather gets cold?
I'll tell you, Mayor, that if you read all of Section A, it's with the intent to conceal their identity and substantial portion of their face is covered. So we look down to what was added, which hides or covers a substantial portion of the face so as to conceal the identity. So those things sort of come up above your nose. And I think that clarifies it a little bit. It gives you the leeway. Those things are pretty popular. I think it kind of popped up during COVID, but it became more prevalent. I have a handful of those when I go out for a jog in cold weather as well, but I think that covers it. I see that Councilmember Shealy and Councilmember Mitchell have their hands up. I wasn't sure. Councilmember Shealy, were you first?
Yes, he was first.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you, Councilman Mitchell. Yeah, Steve, going off of what you were saying, we're adding those words with the intent to conceal their identity. Does that make it harder for us to enforce, to try to prove that they had intent to conceal their identity? And I mean, and I guess if we put those in, those words are necessary in there, but it was just kind of a question that I had, especially since it says as to conceal the identity of such a person later on. And in the first line where it says with the intent to conceal identity, does that make it harder to enforce this?
Well, I think one of the reasons we put that in there is in our research on this, there is some case law that basically, states that you have to have an element of intent in there. Okay. And then I think it also addresses the situation that the mayor brought up. Obviously, on a cold day when people are wearing these masks out on the street, the officers are not going to be, writing people tickets on that. But if you walk into, a business and you're fully covered up and you're causing, alarm in the business, it may be that, and your intent is to conceal your identity. It may be that there is some enforcement there. And I think we also anticipate that, we're not going to be heavy-handed with this in arresting people and writing tickets right off the bat. We're going to be educational and say, hey, would you take your mask off? You're in the business here, or can you pull your mask down so we can identify you, and not, jump to enforcement as the first means of dealing with someone in a mask.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Mitchell?
Yeah, that's some of the same question I wanted to ask, what Councilman Shealy asked. And I want to make sure that if this is carried out, even with the enforcement part of it, that we are not, once you get to court, if it has to go to court, when they come up to the Fourth Amendment, right, how are we going to address that? If we'll be able to prove those things sometime, because people might come up with something else. And you don't want to, with the Fourth Amendment rights, you don't want to be going to court with that kind of issue. So that's why I was looking at it more on that side of it. I know some of the young people up here is wearing masks when they're doing those drive-by shooting like it was doing 2 days ago. And that's a little different difference, but when you have to come back and even if the officers have to go to court with that and someone want to come back with a good lawyer and sue and say, hey, they're violating the person's rights because of a case that, case in point. And that's what I'm looking at more, on the other side of it. Because it could extend to something larger, what I'm saying.
Yep. I will just add a little bit of what Steve is telling us, that you adding in here this phrase, which is really important, these 5 or so words, with the intent to conceal their identity. You're adding that as opposed to just making this a strict liability statute. In other words, with the absence of those words, then anybody wearing a mask could be arrested. So this is adding an element that increases the burden on the police to establish that idea of the intent to conceal their identity. So it goes back to what the mayor asked earlier, and what Councilmember Shealy asked earlier. If it's cold outside and they got some kind of device on that's trying to keep them warm, that's not the intent. Is not to hide their identity. It is doing it for comfort reasons.
I could just add too that in our research, we did run across a Virginia appellate court case that dealt with a very similar statute in Virginia, and we actually kind of modeled some of the language off of that, where they did uphold the ordinance or statute as constitutional as written. So that's part of the reason we added that language in, and some of the language we have in here is that it's already been reviewed by a court and determined to be constitutional.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Chairman, I'd still like to hear from either DC Thompson or Walker or Captain Bruder about some, scenario where they envision this would be helpful, and maybe a case in point that they've seen recently or something like that. Just make this real for me. Where is this going to come into play?
Mr. Mayor, I leave, let Jason and Dustin, they're dealing with the operations side. Dustin has a couple of examples involving the banks. Dustin, if you want to get it to the mayor.
You designated Jason because I lost my voice, so go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot. I'm sorry, Dustin. Jason.
I already wore him out this morning when we chatted earlier. So
Yeah.
He and the chief have got the same ailment, I think, of laryngitis.
Yeah.
So
Captain
I'll just go off the example there. I don't want to get into the case too much from this weekend. I don't have pictures that we looked at, but let's say those individuals that were our shooters from this past weekend, they were riding around in the area, and I'm making up everything now. It's completely made up, but just for the hypothetical.
This is hypothetical.
If our officers would have seen them driving around Johnson Street with masks completely covered in their own car, that would have been a reason to stop them with this law. Yes, this law is on the books now, but it hasn't been touched in 50 years, I think, almost 50 years. And there's really not a clear consensus on what we should be doing after COVID. So there's people that drive their cars around now like that, but that would have just, with this law updated, we will do an education piece. We'll likely have to do some warnings to some people in the beginning, but that would have given us a tool to possibly stop a shooting. Officers could have intervened then. Once they stopped them, once they saw the guns in the cars, they would have realized, well, that was why they had masks covering their face. It wasn't to stay warm on an 80-degree day. It was to conceal their identity as they went forward. I'm the one that kind of said, hey, we've been talking about it for a little bit, what we were going to do, because the old ordinance really didn't take into effect people wearing masks for health reasons. But I was actually driving around in North Charleston a few weeks ago, or a couple months ago now, and saw somebody completely with a balaclava, which came over their face down to here. This is about all you could see. And they walked right into a bank. And I was like, oh my gosh, that used to be an immediate clue that something bad is about to happen. Luckily, I think the bank had safety protocol in place, because within a couple minutes, he came walking back out. He wasn't sprinting down the street or anything like that. I was listening to North Charleston. They didn't have any calls. Went in the bank. Everything was fine. But again, that would have been, if we saw somebody walking up to a bank dressed completely covered up on a warm day, we would have known this is not good, and had the opportunity to intervene before they go into a rob a bank. So that's some of what our officers were seeing, where they were out at different convenience stores where people would walk in, just like you would see a robbery video or in the movies or something like that. Or as I told the reporter today, walk around in full ski mask with just eye holes cut out and a mouth hole cut out. people walking around like that, and that there's no health reasons for that, especially when you have the mouth hole cut out, other than, you know, wanting to conceal your identity for likely to commit crime. And that'll just give us a tool to be able to intervene a little bit earlier when this law updated and supported and re-educated for everybody out there. Did that answer your question, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir. Thank you. I just wanted to hear that clearly stated. Thank you, Captain.
All right, any further questions, discussions? Are y'all ready for a vote? Okay, all those in favor of item 4B, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. All right. Item C is an ordinance to amend Division 4 regarding abandoned boats and watercraft. Steve, this is yours, please.
Yes, and with me here is Sergeant Morrell and MPO Merrill. And I'll just state that they did a lot of the research, the drafting, the legwork on this from their experience. But I'm just going to hit the highlights again as to what we're amending, and then if there's any questions, they can go into greater depth as to the reasons behind some of this. The biggest thing that we're doing by amending this ordinance is we're adding a mooring permit requirement for watercraft and floating structures that are moored or anchored for a period of more than 14 consecutive days. And the reason we came up with 14 days is that it's actually mandated by the state statute. We can't do any more or less than that. We have to go with the 14 consecutive days. And the primary reason or the benefit of this amendment is it provides a mechanism to obtain the contact information for the owners of watercraft and floating structures in our waters. So if there is a problem, if they do become unmoored or unanchored, or they're leaking oil or garbage falling off the boat, we have a means to contact the owner to ask that they correct that situation before we take enforcement action. And then again, if we need to take enforcement action, we can find the person responsible in order to do that. In the application process, one of the requirements as well is that the person have insurance on the boat, and that way, if the boat does come loose and damage some other person's property, that'll be covered, hopefully by the insurance. And I'll just state that Folly Beach has a similar ordinance. They actually passed theirs a few years ago, and had the state legislation changed to accommodate localities being able to do this. And it's my understanding from the officers that are here with me today who have been in contact with Folly Beach on a regular basis and contacted them as part of the research and drafting of this ordinance, that they've had success with this permitting scheme in holding owners responsible for their boats and correcting problems that they have. A few of the other changes is that we've added floating structures to the things that are being regulated. It's not just boats and watercraft, these rafts that are basically party rafts or
the tiki huts.
Yeah, so those would also be regulated. So if you have one of those anchored in our waters, you're going to have to follow the rules as well, and we'll be able to find you if there is a problem with that. We've added enforcement and penalty provisions for illegally moored and anchored watercraft. We also added a duty to keep your watercraft and floating structures clean, and have enforcement mechanisms and penalty provisions for those that fail to do so. Again, for the leaking boats, the ones that have trash falling off them, those fall under those provisions. We also added livability code enforcement officers to those who can administer and enforce the provisions of the ordinance. And then we did a little reorganization of the ordinance with the definitions and the purpose and that sort of thing. So
looks like a total overhaul of the whole ordinance. It reads better, by the way, I think.
Yeah, and we still have the abandonment provisions in there. So boats that do not comply with the regulations, we are able to seize those boats, and we go through that whole process of contacting the owner, and then if we can't get a hold of an owner, eventually disposing of those boats. And one thing these guys did tell me too is that, with this ordinance scheme in place, we can get at some of these problems earlier before these boats actually sink to the bottom of the water, and then it becomes, tens of thousands of dollars more to remove them than it would be if we get a hold of the problem early on. So.
Very good. Good summation. I entertain a motion to adopt 4C, and then we can go into discussion.
Move for approval.
Second. Okay. And Mr. Mayor, you got your hand up?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to commend Steve and our staff here for pulling this together. I think this is well needed. We've seen over the last hurricane seasons numerous boats that frankly weren't well tended to start with, and then they'd sink, and then we'd wait a long period of time because it would take a long time to get money from the state to pull them out, and it would cost a lot of money. This is being more proactive, and I don't know if y'all have noticed, but just coming over to Ashley River and looking down the river most every morning, the number of boats that are now moored in the river has proliferated, increased markedly over the last few years. And I think it's wise for us to know who's out there and whether they have insurance and whether they're going to be responsible or not. I see some boats out there. Honestly, I'm wondering one day to the next whether they're going to sink or not. They don't look like they're in very good shape. So anyway, hats off. I think this was sorely needed, and I appreciate y'all's efforts to pull this together.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Any other committee member have a question or comment?
I do.
Yes, sir. Yes,
Just curious, I would assume that our jurisdiction runs down the Ashley River, probably up to Dolphin Cove or maybe the bridge. Where do we start and stop? And I guess the Wapu Cut, I would assume. So,
in the Ashley River it kind of jumps around a little bit like some of our other jurisdiction on land. Our farthest point is up towards Magnolia Plantation on the west side, and on the east side, Dolphin Cove, and the old Rodeo plant, Lanxess, I believe it's called now. That's essentially where we end on the eastern side of the river.
And then you also got Daniel Island.
And then, up the Wando and Cooper, both sides of Daniel Island, all the way up to 41 Bridge on the Wando, and up the Cooper, all the way up, going a decent way up in Berkeley County.
And down through the Wapu, we have to the Stonewall, all the way to the Limehouse Bridge.
Okay, great.
And up Folly River on the side of James Island. So we have a good amount of coverage to that whole area for this statute.
Very good. Well, thank you for all your work on this. Great work. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is very much a proactive ordinance opposed to just waiting on something to happen, and gives them some more tools, because once these things get into that danger zone and sink, it becomes an environmental concern for everybody. I think so. Anything we can do to clean that up, it's a good idea. All right, call the vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? The ayes have it. Item D is the approval to purchase body worn cameras as part of the replacement plan with extended warranty in the amount of $188,625.05. I'll entertain a motion to approve item D.
Move for approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Steve, anything about this one?
No, I don't have anything. If you have any questions, we do have people on that can answer.
Yes. Anybody have any questions or concerns about item D? Seeing none, I'll call a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. E is police department approval to purchase an upgrade to the existing video management software. In the amount of $167,000. I'll entertain a motion to approve.
Move for approval.
Second. All right. Any discussion or questions or concerns, Mr. Mayor?
Not about this particular item, but if I could ask, unless they just know off the top of their head and willing to give us a report next meeting, Mr. Chairman, as to how our spending has come along on that extra $1 million worth of ARPA funds that we put forward for police technology and cameras.
Okay. Good.
Yes, sir. We actually got Lieutenant McLaughlin is on for that, Mr. Mayor, to kind of give us an update. on the cameras, Pat, if you would.
Right.
The chairman might want to hold it till the next meeting, but I'll leave that to you.
Yeah, we'll hold it to the next meeting,
Okay.
but we'll just give you advance warning on doing that.
Right.
Councilman Mitchell, is your hand up?
Yes, this is not that same item, but it's with the mayor alluded to. I want to ask them, we can do this for the next meeting too, if I can get a briefing or update. I remember one time we had cameras that could be moved. I don't know if it's still in that same category or not, but in those areas where we are having so many different shootings on Johnson Street and Stewart Street, in those areas that I have a high crime area in there, that if cameras can be moved to place in those particular areas. Because if they pull back, even the police department, they pull up their reports, they'll see that that's where a lot of shooting and things is happening in that district and in that area. So I just want to get some background information on that. If they can be moved to be placed in those areas, because that's what we had said years ago when we had the cameras that would be moved when we found that there's a high concentration, if you may, on an area as such. So that's it.
So Deputy Walker, you got all that from Councilwoman Mitchell?
Yes, sir. We got it. We'll be ready for the next meeting. We have all that information for you.
All right. Well, I don't think we call the vote yet on E. So all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. Item F is a joint request from both police and fire to an approval to submit to the port security grant application in the amount of almost $800,000. The police are requesting equipment for the explosive device team and drive-on docks, and the fire department requests hazmat response mobile training props and an upgrade electronics. So this is just an application for a grant.
Move for approval.
Second, okay. Chief Cockcroft, I saw you on earlier. I didn't know if you wanted to add anything to this.
No, sir. It's same as usual. We're just continuing to do upgrades and keep up with our equipment as well as our training from the hazmat side, just to make sure we continue to be on the cutting edge of what we need to do when it comes to that type of response.
Okay. Chief Walker, anything else to add to this either?
God.
No, sir. No, it's not.
Yeah. So this, Mayor, did you want to chime in?
I was just going to ask, I think the drive-on dock mentions it's for the harbor patrol. Is it for police rather than fire? And just confirming where those drive-on docks are proposed to be located.
Yes, sir. Hi, I can speak to that.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, the drive-on docks are going to be located at the Coast Guard dock campus.
Okay.
And then I'll also add that there's a 25% match for this grant, which will be $265,410. So that would need to be budgeted in fiscal year 2024.
Well, that's great. And that's terrific that the Coast Guard down at the end of Trav Street, right? The one downtown or the one up in North Charleston?
1 second, let me confirm for you.
It's actually going to be North Charleston, but they're able to be moved. Those will be for our unit. They're able to be moved at any point.
I see.
Did you hear that, Mayor?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Did we have to come to a separate MOU of any kind with the Coast Guard about that? If or maybe we do that when we get the grant later on. But anyway, I'm very thankful to the Coast Guard for collaborating with us. That's terrific.
I believe we already approved an MOU with the Coast Guard a little bit earlier in the season, so we should be okay.
Good, thank you.
Okay. All right. Any questions, just other discussion on item F? Seeing none, this is just a approval to apply for the grant. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. That's all on the posted agenda. Any other items? Okay. Seeing none, we are adjourned, and I'll see a good number of you folks at about 30 minutes or so.
Thank you all.
Thank you all very much. Appreciate it. And thank you all for coming over here. Sorry for the confusion. We are adjourned. That was too bad. Never mind. I hope this new revised ordinance